All right, we're back for part 2 of the video for 8.0. So we're going to look at rationalizing the denominator now. Back in the old days when you had to do a lot of calculations by hand, it was actually very uncomfortable to divide things when the divisor, the number in the bottom of the fraction was an ugly, ugly decimal. So a lot of times we'd like to get that to the top so that it could be under the division sign. It makes the computation a lot easier. All right, so to do that, what we're going to do is we're actually going to multiply top and bottom, all right, by whatever radical we see in the denominator. So here we have a root 3. So I'm going to multiply top and bottom by root 3. The top is 1 times root 3, or just root 3. The bottom is root 3 times root 3, which would be root 9. But we know that root 9 simplifies to 3. All right. Now, if you write down root 3 as a decimal and you try and do this division both ways, you're going to notice that doing the division in that second route is a lot easier to do. The first route, the division, is really kind of nightmarish because you have to add so many place values just to even be able to divide by a reasonable approximation to root 3. All right, if I move to the second one, we're going to try that same method. So I'm going to multiply top and bottom by the square root in the denominator, which is root 2. All right, so I have 3 times root 2, which is 3 root 2 in the top. In the bottom, root 2 times root 2 is root 4, but we know that's 2. So I have 3 root 3 over 2. All right, and that would be our standard form for that answer. All right, these aren't going to come up a whole lot in this class, but when you get to Algebra 2, you'll have to use this quite a bit. Looking to the next one, again, we want to rationalize that denominator. So we're going to multiply top and bottom by root 2. All right, top I get 2 root 30. Bottom I get root 2 times root 2, which is root 4. That's 2 root 30 over square root of 4 is 2. Those 2's cancel, so I'm at root 30. Now, the thing I always want to check at this point is I'm going to go off to the side and I'm going to check that 30. 30 is 2 and 15, 3 and 5. Now, notice I have no pairs. Without pairs, I can't simplify it at all. So root 30 is my final answer on this one. Now, every once in a while, you'll see one like 12. They really won't come up a ton, but occasionally, just every once in a while, they do. All right, in this one, we have to remember that we can't just multiply by the root 2. That plus sign kind of throws a little hiccup at us, because if I try and multiply the bottom by root 2, when I do this, I have to distribute, so I end up with root 2 plus 2. I still have a radical in the denominator. And no matter what I try and do, if I just multiply by root 2's, that doesn't change for us. All right, so the technique that we're going to use is we're actually going to multiply top and bottom by something called the conjugate. So instead of a 1 plus root 2, we're going to do a 1 minus root 2. All right, so I'm still multiplying by something that equals 1, so I'm not changing the value. But we're doing this to lean on the difference of two squares pattern. So in the top, if I distribute, I get 2 minus 2 root 2. All right, in the bottom, I'm going to have to FOIL. So first times first is 1. Outers is negative root 2. Inners is root 2. And then last is root 2 times root 2, which is root 4, which just simplifies to a 2. Now, notice these middle terms. Notice how they cancel out for us. All right, that is the whole advantage of multiplying by the conjugate. Because now I've got 2 minus 2 root 2 over 1 minus 2. All right, so that's 2 minus 2 root 2 over negative 1. All right, which because it's just a negative 1, we can actually clean it up a little bit more. We'll just divide everything by negative 1. So I have negative 2 plus 2 root 2. All right, and again, these are not going to come up a ton, but it's a good review because it will come up again in Algebra 2. If I go to 13, 13 and 14 are really just quick solving quadratics where we don't need to use factoring or the quadratic formula. They're places where we can take the square root of both sides. So in 13, divide both sides by 12 to isolate the x squared. All right, and then I'm going to take the square root of both sides. All right, when I do that, I'm going to get a plus or minus because it could be positive or negative. And I have root 1, which is 1, over root 2. Now, this isn't standard form because there's a radical in the denominator. So I'm going to clean that up like the last two examples. I'm going to multiply top and bottom by that root 2. And I get plus or minus root 2 over root 4, which is just a 2. All right, so those are my two answers to that problem. And then last but not least, if there's other stuff outside of the squared quantity, we're just going to isolate it. So in this one, that 4 is there. So I'm going to isolate by dividing by 4. Now I have a quantity squared by itself equals 25/4. All right, next I'm going to take the square root of both sides to undo that squared. All right, and when I do that, I get 2x plus 1 on this side. On the other side, I'm going to get a plus or minus, because when I square something, a negative or a positive goes to the same thing. Square root of 25 is 5, square root of 4 is 2, so I have 5 halves. All right, now I'll finish this out by subtracting 1. All right, so I've got 2x equals positive 5 halves minus 1. I'm also going to have 2x equals negative 5 halves minus 1, because we really have to solve this for both the positive and the negative 5 halves. So if I clean this up, that's 2x equals 3 halves, divide by 2 or multiply by 1/2, and I get x equals 3/4. There's one of my solutions. And on the other side, I've got 2x equals negative 7 halves, multiply or divide each side by 2 or multiply by 1/2, and I get negative 7/4. All right, so those are my two solutions to that quadratic. And again, this is a route that saves us from having to multiply it out, get everything to one side, and factor. All right, anytime that you see a quantity squared and all the variables are inside that quantity, we can isolate that squared piece, take the square root of both sides, and solve the result. All right, that takes you through all the notes for 8-0. So you should be good to go for tonight's homework. Bring your questions tomorrow, and we'll get them answered. All right, have a great day.